What's up, beautiful people of YouTube? It's your boy Alan back with another video. Today I find myself in beautiful Dawn Park in Taiwan. And today I want to talk about what it's like working at a European-based company where the HQ is based in Europe as an American. Specifically in my context, I worked at a AI startup based in Berlin, and I was a product marketing manager there, and I worked there for a year and 2 months until I got laid off. A bit more context, right? I initially got hired because at the time the company was planning on trying to expand into the US market, right? So the company was originally based out of Germany, and for most technology companies, they do want to try to expand into the US market because the total addressable market, and there's just a lot more money in the US market, so logically it makes sense to try to expand to the market so you can grow revenue faster, right? And they initially began doing a big hiring spree out into the US market. So they built out the go-to-market organizations, specifically marketing sales in the US market, because they figured having those regional specific folks in the US would make it easier to sell into the States, right? And the way they divided up the org was basically the product and engineering orgs. They mainly sat in Berlin, and then the go-to-market teams like marketing and sales mainly sat in the US, right? I think number one, the cultures are pretty different in terms of like work-life balance. I noticed the pace of the go-to-market organization, like the marketing and sales teams, it was a lot quicker. We could turn things around like in a week, like a new first call deck, an industry play in like a few weeks. It's just like if you're working on the marketing and sales org, you could definitely feel the pace at which the teams were shipping new collateral or new go-to-market strategies was a lot quicker versus the product and sales, the product and engineering orgs, which were sitting in the UK and Berlin mainly. And I think the pace of what the product and eng teams are shipping were a little bit slower than what I've usually seen in US companies. And then that kind of also hurt our ability to keep up with the market in the AI orchestration space, because the AI orchestration competition in the US would constantly be shipping new features and products on a weekly basis, and then maybe our team would take another like 2 or 3 weeks or even a month to get that same feature out. And then the way we were trying to spin it was kind of build it once, build it right. That was kind of our competitive differentiation. At the time, it was like, yeah, our product and engineering team ships things a lot slower, but hey, there's going to be less bugs. It's going to be more reliable versus our competitors, right? So that's kind of how we spun that into a competitive differentiation on the go-to-market side. Even though I felt like in the AI space, it's better to ship a lot quicker and just keep up, because I think new users are really focused on like trying out the latest features and innovations, and if we didn't have it, then our competition would go somewhere else. And then I think also culturally, I think like Europeans, or I don't know, you guys can correct me if I'm wrong, but there was like because I spent a month working out in Berlin, just as like, because I was already out there, and then I noticed that like in the office, like people would be done out of the office by 5 or 6 p.m. But on the US team, given that it was still like a remote organization, but like I know that on the US team I would still be slacking folks at like 5, 6 p.m., even like 10 or 11 p.m. and I would still be getting responses. Like I would get emails on the US side, specifically on like the product marketing org and marketing org. So I know the US team will very much grind it out and work these longer hours. But if I'm sending Slacks or emails later in the day on the European side, I'll just get a response the next day. So I just felt like they have better work-life balance, which I do kind of envy at times. And also, when I was working out in Berlin, I just felt like there was like less like tension and stress when I was working at the company. And then when I would go back to the US, I just felt so much like pressure again built up. Maybe it's like something in the air, I don't know, like we're working in New York and just having that American work culture mindset, right? And then what I also noticed was looking at the kind of the biggest players in AI, I just felt like a lot of the innovation was actually happening more in the US versus Europe. I think some of the well-known like software companies that I can like think about the top of my head that came out of like specifically Germany would probably just be SAP. And there's also like I think Revolut based out of London or somewhere in Europe. And then in the AI space, like the only big AI player I can think about is like Mistral. And then when I think about like all the innovation happening in the US, specifically in the AI industry, right? You have OpenAI, Anthropic, Google, Meta, just to name like the top players, right? So I just felt like most of the innovation was happening in the US. Something in the culture of, I don't know, like Europeans taking a little bit more time and regulation to ship things, or makes it harder for them to create these companies that are super innovative. I don't know. There's something in the work cultures there, and maybe there's also something that has to do with American AI companies just like having a very intense work culture on the product and engineering side. So that also helps create very innovative products. Like I mentioned to you earlier, I don't know if it's like that at all European companies, but our product and engineering teams would ship things at a lot slower pace, and they value work-life balance more. And then I think there was also like a big shift when around like 2014 or 2015 with the new president in the US, right? And there was also a trend in like, I guess specifically the AI industry, not just like software. Because I remember like selling like SaaS, it'd be easier to sell across countries. But I think like with like political dynamics, or like for example, like American companies want to buy from American companies, so that made it harder for a European-based company to sell to an American company. And vice versa. Whole sovereign AI trend in the industry, which was like a nation focused on deploying and managing its own AI innovations. Okay, I wrote it down somewhere, but basically like sovereign AI is the idea of a nation focused on independently governing and deploying its own AI systems. And that was also a really big trend because that whole sovereign AI theme, it played really well into us selling into European companies. Because, for example, what I noticed was sometimes a German-based company would just buy our product or decide to work with us versus our competitors, just because, frankly, we are made in Germany, right? They want to support a German-based company, and then so sometimes like not even having the best product would win, I guess. But sometimes then there's certain edge cases where having the best product and building the best proof of concept or demo would allow us to win us deals. So it's very like there's a lot of factors involved, but the whole sovereign AI trend kind of came up as we began working there, and that made it really hard for us to sell into US based organizations, and that ultimately led to a lot of downsizing on the US team, because they built out this entire go-to-market organization in marketing, sales, and they weren't seeing the revenue close, right? And I think around like 2 or 3 months of me into the job, they like probably let go like the entire US sales team and some marketing people. And obviously that's not a good sign as a new hire, right? Seeing that attrition, like you obviously want to join a company that's like growing and expanding, right? Versus downsizing, and specifically in the US team, right? Because I'm on the US side as well. And then obviously like 10 or 11 months later, they came for me, right? So the Grim Reaper came for me eventually. But I think that also contributed to the stress of working at a European-based company as an American, because I obviously saw like our sales teams get cut, and slowly our marketing team get cut, and then if you can think about like, right, like I'm a US employee, my salary is probably a lot more than some of our product and engineering teams based in the UK and Berlin. So there's obviously like a huge pressure for me to go 110% every day to justify the significantly higher costs they're paying me, because I'm off geographic location, right, based in the US, specifically New York City. And that was also a lot of pressure, because like if our US business is not doing well, then I'm just like, why am I here as well? Because like they're paying me significantly more than my Berlin and UK co-workers, right? and that just also adds to the pressure, and it just makes you kind of feel like you're on an island as a U.S. employee at a European-based company at times. And that's probably true for like a European person working at a American-based company. But I just wanted to share my thoughts and experiences of working at a European-based AI company and what it was like to do that as an American. Obviously, my experience is unique. It could be different for everybody, but if anybody has similar experiences, we'd love to hear more in the comments.